Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here. Thank you, Emily, for the introduction. Karen and I will put our contact information in the chat a little later in the presentation. So if you want to reach out to either of us, you would be welcome. So this is us here, and this is a photo actually from the recent Watershed Roundtable. Karen, you can go ahead and advance to the next slide where we talk about what we will focus on today. So this morning, I will talk first a little bit about the why of why you need resilience in your watershed groups, how you go about building that. We will focus on these recent capacity building projects that Emily mentioned that the Watershed Alliance has been leading. Then I'll hand it off to Karen for a little bit to walk you through some of the common capacity challenges that watershed groups face and some of the tools that have been developed by the Watershed Alliance in partnership with River Network to address those challenges. And then we'll go into a fun interactive part of the presentation. We will come off of screen share and pitch each other a few scenarios. And I would encourage you, there will be time at the end for Q&A. And so as you're hearing us talk through these sort of invented scenarios, you can also be thinking about similar types of challenges that your own groups may be facing. And if you'd like to share them with us, we'd be glad to let you know what we think and how we might be able to help. So that is that. And so first we'll focus on just some sort of watershed group and capacity building 101. So as most of you know, watershed groups are collectives of people working together locally to protect a specific watershed. And all of these characteristics that I'll talk about on this slide are important because they really form the foundation and the strength and the unique attributes of what a watershed group is. And one of the messages that I hope you take away today, I think it's really easy in this work to focus on deficits. Think about what do we need, where are we not as strong as we hope to be. But I think in many cases, those things that feel like challenges are really the flip side of something that is a strength. And so watershed groups, they are local, they're grassroots, they're voluntary, they're driven by passion and shared commitment to a local resource. And that matters. Actually, Karen, could you go back for just 1 second? Matters a lot. They also take this wide variety of organizational forms. And there's no right answer, right? So you can be an ad hoc group, you could be an incorporated 501c3, you may have various kinds of fiscal sponsorship or sort of shared leadership models, and all of those are great. And they all come with their own unique strengths and challenges. And finally, because this work is complex, it often crosses municipal boundaries. It involves multiple agencies, so necessarily it involves collaboration. And collaboration is in and of itself a skill set, as Emily mentioned, one that we'll spend a whole day talking about at the upcoming conference. Now we can go ahead, thank you. So as I said, strengths are, I want to start from strengths in this presentation, and I hope that you all feel like you can start from strengths in your work. Some of these strengths really came out of that same watershed assessment work that Emily mentioned that was done several years ago. And so that identified needs, but it also identified what makes watershed groups strong. So it is passion, it's knowledge, it's commitment. The watershed groups in the Hudson River watershed have accomplished a wide range of things over their history. They leverage local knowledge, build strong local relationships, engage community because they are in and of themselves of the community. So it's not like we are over here and the community is over there. Watershed work comes from those communities. And depending on the group, many of them really leverage significant scientific expertise and resources and contribute to science in important and meaningful ways. However, that same watershed needs assessment identified that somewhat, I think, contrary to what was expected, the core needs of watershed groups were not as much around technical issues. It wasn't that they needed more GIS capacity or greater scientific information. It was really that the groups felt that they needed more capacity to get their work done, more organizational glue to be able to function as efficient, effective organizations that were able to meet their missions. As Emily mentioned, I think it was June, Dr. Michael Finewood presented on that work. That webinar is worth watching if you have not already. It's on the Hudson River Watershed Alliance YouTube channel. And that work has been presented a couple of different times over the past couple of years. But really the lesson coming out of that for the Watershed Alliance was figuring out how to focus on and invest in capacity building tools for watershed groups. And that really forms the framework for the work that has been ongoing over the past year. So, Karen, what is capacity and why does it matter? So, in some ways, capacity is sort of a self-evident term, but we just wanted to break it down a little bit because we will be talking about it in so much detail over the rest of this presentation. So fundamentally, it's the ability to get work done using human, financial, and other resources effectively. And in this case, for watershed work, it's being able to serve the resource that you care about in the community that you're part of. So why? This is important because passion isn't enough. We all come to this work out of a sense of care, but that is not sufficient to sustain the work over time. These are complex challenges that we face. It can take years or decades to fully address those challenges. And so the ability to sustain your group over time through transition in different, internal and external contexts is important. And also because the Hudson River Estuary Program Action Agenda specifically names watershed groups as important actors in protecting these resources. And so in order to do that, play that role effectively, those groups themselves need to be strong and effective. So how do we do that? It means taking time, even in the face of what feel like urgent challenges meeting us every day, to focus internally, investing in leadership, in systems and structures to make your group strong and resilient. As we'll talk about in more detail later on in the presentation, the Hudson River Watershed Alliance, in partnership with River Network, has built a number of tools to help you do this. So there are tools focused on sort of the nuts and bolts of basic organizational health, and then also some focused on growth, which is kind of the next level up. There are now self-paced learning toolkits available. They're on the Hudson River Watershed Alliance website. And we also wanted to say that of course the Alliance is there. So these toolkits don't need to stand alone. If your group is confused, if your group is feeling like it's facing a particular challenge, you can always reach out to Emily, who will help you sort of identify what you need and point you in the right direction. So very briefly, throughout the course of 2025, the Hudson River Watershed Alliance has been focusing on meeting this need for capacity building that was identified. And there have been really sort of two bodies of work that the Alliance has developed to meet that need. So one that Karen and I were both closely involved with was the technical assistance sort of facilitated process, which was offered to watershed groups through a request for proposals process. Early in the year, 4 groups were selected out of those that applied: the Fallkill Watershed Coalition, Fishkill Creek Watershed Alliance, Quasaic Creek Watershed Alliance, and the Wallkill River Watershed Alliance. Karen and I each worked with 2 of those groups, and basically we led them through what I would consider like almost sort of a mini strategic planning process. We began with the organizational health checklist that was established by River Network, diagnosed where those groups were running into challenges, where they needed help, walked through the development of a 2-year strategic work plan that both, it included both some sort of mission, vision, high level aspects around what the group's purpose and identity was, but then it also very quickly came down to specific nuts and bolts of what they were going to focus on over the next 2 years. And importantly, in those more specific elements, there were both goals that were focused on the resource and the community, so more externally focused goals, but also more internally focused goals related to strengthening their own organizational capacity and resilience. And then finally, as an element of that project, each group identified one sort of tangible action step, or what they were calling a deliverable, which they, in partnership with the Watershed Alliance, were able to get done during the course of the project. So building a budget or developing position descriptions or a membership agreement, something tangible that would basically check off a box in the work plan and move them forward in accomplishing their work. And then in partnership alongside the technical assistance facilitated portion of this project, there was also a self-led capacity building learning cohort using the same tools from River Network. And there were 8 groups that participated in that process. They did the learning on their own through a series of worksheets, videos, sort of other online resources, and then gathered once a month for a group session. And also, there were office hours with Hannah from River Network that were made available. And so those groups walked themselves through that process, identified again sort of where their organization needed to focus in terms of building its capacity, and were able to do things like rewrite mission statements or consider roles and responsibilities and leadership models, and really position themselves for more focused work going forward. So at this point, I will turn it over to Karen, who's going to talk to you a little bit about capacity building challenges and solutions.
Thank you, Julia. So I work with a lot of different kinds of nonprofits and groups, and capacity challenges are not uncommon. It's something that a lot of groups struggle with. And because it's so common, there are lots of resources out there to help you address the issues. But trying to find them and trying to use them can feel a little bit like drinking from a fire hose. There's a lot of information, and it's often stuff that's a little bit unfamiliar, so it can just feel very overwhelming. So we really just shout out to the River Network. We love the framework that the River Network and the Alliance put together for the organizational health and growth toolkits. So we're going to use that as a frame for talking about the important elements of organizational health. Um, because it's very straightforward. There's a lot of tools to support you, and it's really clear what the next steps would be as you work on this. So the elements that they've included in the organizational health toolkit are mission statement, leadership, define roles, finance and budget, and work plan or roadmap. And so we're going to go through each of those one by one, talking about what kinds of things you might be happening with your group that means you need to address this issue, as well as what, why, and how you can address them. As I go through well, you'll see the cartoon, hopefully. Where's the cartoon? There we go. Okay, so these are also borrowed from River Network. We hear things like we can't agree on what we need to do. And so I'm going to do this for each of those elements. And so again, as you hear them, if you're thinking, oh, this is familiar to me, maybe think about some questions you might have about these different capacity elements when we get to the question and answer portion at the end. So we hear a lot as consultants, we can't agree on what we need to do. We need your help to figure it out. And so when we hear that, we often think, oh, well, what's your mission and how are you using it? How is it helping you? So what is a mission statement? Well, it's why you exist. It really clarifies the issues you address and explains why you're working together. And why is that important? It's because it helps you clarify your purpose and know what direction you're moving in. It also provides some guardrails so that you are focused on what you are trying to accomplish and not distracted by too many other things, which is easy to do, especially as groups initially form. You get very excited about all the things that you could be doing when people are interested in your work, which you have to balance with trying to accomplish your mission. A well-written mission statement can help you make decisions about what you do and what you don't do. And it also can help inspire others and bring folks along in the work because, as you know, and as we'll talk about later, bringing more people onto the work to build support kind of generally in the community, as well as getting more people to help you do the work, is a pretty important part of building capacity. So how can the organizational toolkit help you? Well, in the checklist, there's some great questions that help you reflect on your group's mission statement. There is a video that Hannah did. Shout out to Hannah because I know that she's here. The videos are fantastic. I don't know how she did them so clearly and succinctly, and so I recommend them all the time. They're great. So there's a video to support that, how you craft and review a mission statement. And they also talk about vision and values. New groups are often just focusing on mission, and that's the most important piece. Vision and value statements can also support those. Vision being the future you're imagining, and values is the beliefs behind how you are going to do this work, how you're going to interact with other people, and the beliefs that underlie the decisions that you make. And then in addition, there's individual worksheets for mission, vision, and values to help you move that work forward on your own. So another thing we hear a lot is Once you start doing work and you think about all the things you want to do, you say, well, who can take all this work on? And we're not sure who makes decisions about this. And if you're lucky, like this little yellow group, you have a lot of people around the table, but sort of like who does what. So when we hear this, we think, oh, maybe you need some help with creating a leadership structure and some decision making tools and how you interact with each other. So what is that? So who leads the group? That doesn't have to be one individual. It could be more than one, depending on the structure you choose. You define how others are involved and how the leaders, whoever they are, consult with others so that it's more clear who's making the decisions and how everybody else is involved in supporting that or debating it. So why? Well, having clear leadership is leadership's role is to make sure that vision, resources, and governance, how you operate, how you work together, is clear. And if you know who's making the key decisions, then you'll have more clarity on that. It can also really help manage expectations about who does what, especially the decision-making tools, like whose job was this, who needs to be informed, who needs to be doing the work, who's responsible, who's accountable, things like that. And so how does the organizational toolkit help? There's questions on the checklist to reflect on your group leadership model and decision making. So sometimes this is something that happens organically and not intentionally. And so we always encourage folks to be more intentional about these things. So these questions help you think about that. There's also a video about the different kinds of leadership models, which is really terrific, and the different decision making tools. And there's also a PDF of the different decision making models, um, so that you can review them and use them in your work at your meeting, perhaps. Another question we get: one person is doing everything. We need more people. If only we had more people. This happens a lot, and I've helped groups with this problem. I've also been involved in this problem, being sometimes that person that does everything. So what that calls for usually is defining roles more clearly. So what does that mean? Well, it's who does what, and importantly, it's not just the leaders. So often, if it's a nonprofit, you have descriptions for your chair or president or your vice president and your secretary and treasurer, but nobody else. We encourage you to think about defining other roles so that more people are clear on what the work that needs to be done and what they're responsible for. The other thing that it does is helps document the group's work, like what are you doing and what needs to be done, so who needs to be doing it. And when you document it and write position descriptions, it can help support volunteer recruitment, which, as you know, as we all know, is extremely important to getting this work done and sustaining it over time. So why is it important? Well, it helps manage expectations about what folks are to do, and also on the boundary side, if people are asking you to do too many things, you can say, "Hold on, this is not my role, and if we need someone to do this, we need to figure out how we're going to recruit someone else to help do this work." So we're trying to manage that overload, burnout. It can also help with engagement. If you have a description for what you want volunteers to do, it's going to be a little bit easier to engage the right people to do the work you need to do, not just warm bodies, which we love. We like warm bodies, but often need specific work done. And if we can find people who are good at those things or have experience in those things, all the better. So how can the toolkit help? There's questions to reflect on the formal and informal roles in your group, really writing that down and documenting them. There's a video about defining group roles and some nice information about recruiting more people, really good tips and advice on that. And there's a lot of templates and worksheets here, which I think is really, really helpful as well. So there's a position description template as well as examples. There's a board inventory or matrix, and if you don't have a board because you're not organized that way, it's just a list of the people that are the core volunteers who and what kind of skills they have to you can assess what skills you have and maybe think about what skills you need, again, helping with volunteer recruitment, as well as a volunteer interest form. So being really intentional about how you recruit volunteers and vet them and decide who is going to be most helpful for your group at what time. Also, who's involved, right? Who's involved in making those decisions. Clarifying that can be really helpful. So next, budgets. Oh, we hear about budgets all the time. Um, this is something that is really frightening to people. I don't know what's in the budget. I don't know if we have one. I had one group when the budget question came up, everyone just turned and looked at the treasurer and waited to see what expression he had on his face, to decide what they're going to do. I'll say that's not good enough. Budgets can be scary. You know, you feel like we need to have more money, but everybody needs to have a basic understanding of some information, financial information about the organization. That makes a more resilient organization. And I'll also say that it's not uncommon that small all volunteer groups, there's sometimes people who take advantage of the lack of expertise and understanding. I've been involved in groups like that as well, and that's a nightmare when you have someone who takes the money and having to figure it out. So having a basic understanding makes your group more resilient in a number of ways. So what is that? At the core of it is making sure you track your income and expenses, you know what's coming in and going out. Um, that helps you define your resource needs, how much money you need to do what you want to do. It also can help document your funding sources. And as you grow, it's important to make sure those are diversified so that you are resilient to change, say in changes in government funding, for example. So why is that important? Is to make sure you have enough resources to do the work you promised. Doing it helps build the confidence of the group that you can do this, that you all, it's budgets may be a little bit scary, but I know you can all do your part in this process. And so then it helps build confidence so you can do more of that. It also helps you honor your commitments both to your community, to your funders, and to yourselves and your mission so that you can fulfill your mission more effectively. And it also helps you adapt to change. Even though it's a plan for how you are going to spend your money, knowing how much resources you have and need, you might be able to know if you have some extra resources that can be used in different direction, or know if there's a different priority, what can be moved around. So how does the toolkit help? They have questions to help you reflect on how you track money as well as who was involved. And there's a video. The video for budget is combined with work plans, which is great. Uh, but the first part about budgets, so why budgets are important and how to develop them. And very helpfully, there's also a template for budgets that you can use to create your own. So lastly, we hear this too. I mean, sometimes we say it. We're too busy or we don't have the time or energy for planning or work planning. And so the solution to that is thinking about creating a work plan. So what is that? It's a guide for your work over a set time. It could be as little as a month, could be a quarter, could be a year or 2 years, as we did in that capacity building project. And these are prioritizing actions to accomplish your mission. And it also helps you assign, you can use it to assign work to people or teams. So why is that important? For one, it helps you pace your work. So you're documenting, you know, a couple of these elements help you document your work. And once you start to look at it in a pile of either Post-its or just a pile of words, you might see, oh, this is a lot of things. It might help you pace your work, decide what you're going to do first or later, or where you need to, you know, recruit some more people to help. It helps you track your progress and know what you're getting done, which enables you to tell other people about what you've done. It helps you honor those commitments to your community, to your funders, and to yourselves and your mission. And then when you assign work to people or teams, it gives a little bit of accountability. And I don't mean that in a negative, excuse me, a negative way, but just it helps people know what they're meant to do and helps them do it more effectively. And then we can check in with people and say, hey, is this going well? Is this not going well? It gives you an opportunity to say, if that's not working for you, let's try something else, or let's find more people to help you because we didn't realize what a big task X was. So it's a very helpful tool. And so how can the organizational toolkit help? There are questions in the checklist to help you reflect on how you're planning and prioritizing your group's work now. And then the video talks about why work plans are important, how they can help, and how to use them. And then there's a really helpful work plan template that you can use to adapt to your own work. So the toolkit really is excellent. It takes you step by step through each of the elements. And I think Emily's going to put the link in the chat. The QR code will also work. So the organizational health toolkit that I just reviewed is for newer groups or groups in transition. It includes that checklist that explains what each element is and has a few reflection questions. There, as I mentioned, there's also worksheets and templates and videos to help you understand it more and help you do that self-paced learning. It's really terrific, really clear and straightforward, and I appreciate it very much. And so exciting for an organizational development nerd like me, there's also an organizational growth toolkit. So right now there's a checklist. This is for groups that have completed the organizational health work and are looking to take the next step, building their capacities. So there's a checklist that includes communications and marketing, financial and legal infrastructure, some leadership policies and planning, taking the next step from defining your structure to institutionalizing that a little bit more in your organization. Evaluation systems, checking in how your work is going and what's working and what's not to help make decisions later, as well as checking in with your community to see what they need and really bringing them along in your service to them. So the checklist is up there. Worksheets and videos are coming in 2026, and I'm sure they'll be as excellent as the others were. So we are talking about checklists and things to do, and the checklists are so helpful at helping you get things done. And also, as Julia said in the beginning, at their core, watershed groups are collections of people. And so people don't just need checklists, they need more than that. So in order to continue participating in groups and for continuity, right, you need people to stay with your group and to recruit new people over time. So how do you do that in a very general way? So people want to participate in groups when they feel they belong, they're valued, that they feel the benefits, and they are making a difference in the work. And so that's where work plans can be helpful, in addition to the way you treat one another. Work toward goals they understand, believe in, and even help create. So again, actually defining your priorities together and then working toward them is part of helping people want to be part of your group. That they know how decisions are made and how the work is carried out. It's clear to them, so they know what's happening and what their role in it is. As well as having adequate resources to sustain their work. And sometimes that's money, sometimes that's time, sometimes that's people or materials. And so that is certainly motivating when you have enough to sustain your work. And when you document that and you plan for that, you're going to be in a better place to have the resources you need to do it. So, quick before we go into the scenarios, we have some tips for resilient watershed relationships, which are the core of watershed groups. So, we encourage you to put relationships first. Yes, you want to work through the checklist, but you also want to check in with people and make sure that they're understanding this and having what they need. Make the time to talk and take the time to talk to slow things down if you need to in order to make sure people are feeling part of the group and feeling like they know what's happening. And when you do that, try to listen more than you talk and really understand people's perspectives and before you share your own. That can be helpful in building those relationships. Acknowledging differences and that you're not always going to agree about everything, but that does not mean that you cannot move forward in the work. We also think it's important to celebrate wins when you finish that great project and maybe you're checking something off the list. I like wins. I like these internal wins, getting that capacity building project done, getting that work plan done. That's not going to be something your community necessarily celebrates, but certainly your team can do that. And acknowledging that and taking time to say, "Hey, we really appreciate that work. This is really helping us move forward." It's very motivating and helpful for folks who you want to be involved. And lastly, be brave, right? So often, as Julia said, we get into this work because we're passionate about resources, we're passionate about water, we really want to make a difference in our community. And so sometimes this other kind of work doesn't feel like the work, but we're telling you that the good work in the community, the good work for the resources cannot happen without this other internal work. So be brave as you step into it. Sometimes it feels like, oh, if we all know each other and we're friends, we don't need to be this formal, or we're not a 501(c)(3), so we don't have to be this formal. You can do that, and when you document things and you are clear about people's roles and how things work, you're going to be a more resilient group of people no matter how you're organized. And so just bravely step into this work and ask for help if you need it. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Julia.
Thank you, Karen. That was so great. And yeah, I think when Karen and I and Emily were beginning to brainstorm for this breakfast webinar, Karen and I have been really closely involved in this work over the past, whatever, I don't know, like 8, 9 months now, working with the technical assistance groups and talking with Emily to see how the cohort has been going. And we just thought it would be fun to take advantage of the fact that we have two facilitators on the call this morning who know these resources, know watershed groups, and as Karen said, also work with other kinds of nonprofit and community organizations who really are often facing very similar challenges. And so, as Karen kind of ended with just now, we wanted first to recognize that the real world is a complex place. And so, your group, you might be feeling a little bit overwhelmed by everything you just heard. You might be thinking, I'm not sure quite where my group's challenges fall in all of those different alternatives that Karen presented, or maybe we have challenges across 3 or 4 of those kinds of um, organizational issues, and that's fine. Like that's real. Everybody, groups are inherently sort of messy and human, and then their strengths and challenges are interrelated. And so we thought it might be fun to do like a little bit of an advice, sort of column style scenario setup where we will basically describe narratively an imaginary scenario. So this is not based on a particular group that either of us has worked with. This is kind of an amalgamation of things that we have heard from multiple groups across multiple sectors over time. And as Karen alluded to in her cute little cartoon slides, what we hear on the surface, like what a group will describe to us at first that they're having trouble with, sometimes needs to get peeled back a little bit to figure out what the underlying causes are. So we'll model that. And then we'll talk through the ways that any particular situation might have more than one possible prescription of how the group can move forward. And in our responses to these scenarios, we will continue to focus on the river network resources because they are amazing and digestible. And so, like, there's a whole universe of resources out there. You can certainly Google for them. We could point you in the right direction if you have questions, but we really felt that it's just such an amazing opportunity to have these targeted, tailored resources provided for watershed groups in the Hudson River Valley, and that we will continue to direct you to those resources for now. They're, as Karen said, with the QR code, and as Emily posted in the chat, they're available right on the Hudson River Watershed Alliance webpage. You can find them easily just by navigating to the homepage. And so as we verbally talk through them, know that anything we reference, you can, click through and find the tools that we're talking about. So here's how it's going to go. We're going to sort of be in dialogue with each other. One of us will pose this hypothetical scenario. The other will reflect on it, offer a diagnosis and prescription. We'll go through 4. And then that really concludes our prepared materials for this morning. And we would encourage you to chime in the, I guess, the Q&A or the chat with your own scenarios or questions from your work. And we will just continue the conversation from there. And I think we'll come off screen share at this point. Karen, do you want to pitch the first one? You're muted right now. You're on mute.
Well, then I will come off of mute. So this is the first scenario. Our group has been meeting for a few years and accomplished some good work. We've done some water quality testing, some stream cleanups, but our momentum has stalled. We're not sure what to focus on next, and at meetings, we often go in circles. The core group of people are still coming to our meetings, but a few have dropped off and a lot of new members or energy. So Julia, what would you say to a group that said that to you?
Well, that is such a common situation. And actually, Karen and I, in preparing these scenarios, gave them little mnemonic names that we could remember, and we called this one the mission muddle. And it is a situation that almost all groups face at some point. So that idea, particularly for grassroots groups that have formed around some kind of a challenge, you came in with a lot of initial energy, you got some things done, you've sort of paused to take a breath, and you say, okay, well, now what? So I think my diagnosis of the situation would be that this group really needs to get clear on what its particular mission, vision, and values are. Why do you exist in the world? Sure, you meet once a month or you meet once a quarter and people know each other and you have snacks and you do a yearly river cleanup or whatever it is, and that's all very nice. But what is it that is driving you? Why do you keep coming together? What do you want to see in the world? And having that be a collective exercise, having that be something that's shared, developed together, and really held collectively by the full group. That would be the first thing that I would recommend. And so again, as we mentioned, there are great tools for that. The mission worksheet is wonderful that the River Network developed. And so, it's easy to use on your own. You don't need a facilitator. You can just go print it out and bring it to your next meeting. So that's the first thing that I would encourage this group to do. Um, there were some things in the description that make me think there may also be roles and responsibilities work to do. Like if you're sitting around once a month, sort of talking in circles and not sure, who makes a decision, not sure what happens next, not sure how to reach consensus or conclusion about any of these things that you might do, that tells me also that some sort of additional structure in terms of how you function organizationally might be important. And so again, those roles and responsibilities and decision-making frameworks tools from the River Network are great, and also probably worth looking at. Yeah. And I mean, I think one of the messages that we hope you take away is that you may see parts of yourself reflected in a lot of these different tools, and that's normal and great. Like, so, our prescription would be focus on mission, think about roles, but you might say, gee, the core group that's meeting is kind of small. So maybe we also want to talk about volunteer recruitment, or maybe we want to talk about ways to be more visible and relevant in our community. And this is not intended to be reductive. Like if those feel resonant to you, it's probably worth looking at those additional resources as well. All right. So we will now switch roles and I will pitch a scenario to Karen. And so this scenario, Karen, is, you kind of referenced it already in your earlier materials, but this scenario is one person is the life force of our group. This individual does so much and knows so much. We are grateful for their work, but we're also worried that we might be relying on them too much. What if they want to step back at some point? No one else in the group is willing to do all of that work. What would you say?
Well, I would say, first of all, we've all been in that situation. Almost every group has this at some point. As I mentioned earlier, like I've been that person, so I know how that feels. And the name we gave the scenario is the One Human Show. And so I'll just say that this is not good for groups. This is not good for the person who is taking on all that work, and it's not good to the rest of them either, even though you might be relieved that you're not having to do all that work. Ultimately, it makes your group a lot less resilient. So, what I would say for a diagnosis is you need to develop some systems to share the work, responsibility, knowledge, and relationships more equitably, um, just to be kind to each other, and also to prepare for any leadership transition, because nobody should have to be with the watershed group forever. People deserve to be able to pass it on with intention and grace and given a beautiful send off, and know that that work can continue. And that can't happen unless some of this load is shared. So the first thing we suggest you do is complete the roles and recruitment um, uh, uh, part of the toolkit, and perhaps the leadership model activities, and think about maybe some more shared leadership so that you're working in that responsibility and sharing the load into the actual structure of your group. Um, Again, there could be more than one thing that's going on, but one of the reasons we're giving you just one or two steps to start with is so it's a little bit less overwhelming, so that's intentional. Once you've done those pieces, we'd suggest you go on to the organizational growth checklist and start thinking about the leadership policies and planning to help you figure out how you're going to systematize this work going forward so that it doesn't happen again the next time, right? So that's part of documenting information, is that you want to do things in a way that help you function better over time. So that's what I would say about the One Human Show.
Awesome. Thank you.
So next scenario, whoops. Our group is on fire. We formed to address some urgent watershed needs and have been very busy. We are partnering with municipalities and state agencies on projects. We have gotten some grant funding and have committed to run several public programs this year. Everything is going great, right?
Yes. So we named this group the Yes Group. And I would say that it is possible that everything is going great, right? We don't have enough information in what has been described in this scenario to be sure. It's possible that you are doing all of that external facing work and that you also have the core organizational systems in place to be resilient, functional, not burn yourselves out, not lose track of any commitments. But I would say that the way that it was described makes me a little bit skeptical. It seems to me that, and we have all experienced this, it's possible in that moment of initial enthusiasm um, to overstretch yourself. I think this group is at risk of overcommitment. And I think that they probably need to step back, take a breath, and really devote some attention to their core organizational systems that will allow them to be resilient in this work, as we talked about even at the start of this presentation. Um, Particularly, I would want to make sure that they are focusing on work planning and budgeting, all of those things that Karen mentioned around accountability, understanding what your commitments are and honoring those commitments. If you're moving this fast and you're involved in sort of multi-partner projects with potentially large grants and complex municipal or state partnerships, you really want to make sure that you know what you've committed to and that you have the capacity to deliver it. Um, I think it's also worth, I mean, really, this group kind of needs all of it. I would start with work planning and budgeting. I would make sure that you feel good about roles and responsibilities so that, again, you're not overloading a small number of people with too much work. And I would consider, since you seem to have a lot of momentum, really thinking about volunteer recruitment and tools for engaging volunteers effectively. So I think where I would begin, honestly, is going through the checklist itself, which will allow you to sort of do your own diagnosis as a group of among all of these areas of organizational capacity, where do we feel like we're doing okay? So maybe we're really clear on our mission, or maybe we feel fine about our decision making, but we really need help with budgeting. So I would just do that kind of initial screen using the checklist. And then based on what I have heard, I would suggest spending some significant time on budgeting and work planning, because in that context, with a lot of ongoing projects, those tools are going to be particularly helpful. Uh, I would also maybe just pin for like a year or 18 months from now, once this initial sort of glut of projects is behind you. We see it's not uncommon that we see groups like this one have sort of a drop off in energy and end up in something that looks more like the mission muddle a little bit down the road, because you've been so busy saying yes to other people's priorities that you may lose sight of what your own core purpose is. And so when you have a quiet moment, during the winter or between grants, take a minute to go back and do those mission, vision, values exercises for yourselves as a group, so that you know in a lasting, durable way what your reason for being is. And that will, going forward, allow you to screen and be intentional about what you say yes and no to down the road. All right. Uh, Scenario 4. So, Karen, our group is in a pretty good place. We have a core group of committed volunteers. We are clear on our mission. We have some solid organizational structures in place. We know what we're working on, and we are excited to share it. But no one new is showing up to our meetings or our events. How do we reach more people?
This is also a common thing. It's almost the opposite problem of the last group. So we call this one the echo chamber. And this is a group that has put some of those systems in place, but they're really ready to level up the community engagement and communications. And to do that, that's again not ad hoc. We're encouraging everybody to do things with intention and plan and purpose. And so you need to build systems for these. So for this group, I would think about looking at the organizational growth checklist that included some communications and marketing and some next level elements of organizational health and growth. really focusing on community assessment and making sure you're knowing what your community needs are and that you're communicating with them regularly and making sure you're meeting those needs, and communicating with them and marketing or selling your ideas to a larger group of people. Those are going to be, you need to have that strong organizational culture, and then you need to have that community level work and bringing folks along and serving the community piece. So that would be the first step I recommend. And then secondarily, might go back to the organizational health toolkit and look at some of those volunteer recruitment portions of the roles and responsibilities, because those have some great ideas about how to continually recruit for the roles that you need. Maybe you want to recruit people that have communications and marketing experience, or people who are really good or really connected to the community in different kind of community groups and organizations to be part of your group. That's a great way to do this work. You don't have to know everything. You don't have to do everything, but bringing in new people that have these skills is really going to help you level up in a stronger, more resilient way.
Yeah, 100%. Um, So I think that concludes what we had prepared to talk to you about. It was a lot, I think, in a relatively short amount of time. Hopefully, our hope is that you're feeling empowered and excited about this work rather than overwhelmed by all of what there might be out there to do. All organizations across all sectors face these same challenges. They're never done. We were chatting before the webinar went live this morning about how all of us see some aspects of this in our own work, our own lives, and so we encourage you to go away feeling inspired to start wherever you are. And at this point, we would open it up to questions. And Emily, I think there are a few in the chat already.
Yes, there are. Thank you so much, Julia and Karen. For those of you who are watching, we'd love to hear if you see yourself in any of those examples. Feel free to reflect on that in the chat, and use the Q&A box if you have any questions about scenarios that are similar or perhaps different. So we have a great question here to get us started. When is it appropriate to start a new group versus joining an existing group with a similar but perhaps slightly different goal? For example, forming a riverbank conservation group in an area that already has an existing land conservation group. When is it better to share resources versus forming your own group?
I would love to answer that question, or start to answer that question, hear what Julia thinks. So, when we think about new groups, and we think about organizational development, all of the stuff we talked about, the mission, the leadership styles, the roles, I should be able to remember all the things on the list as I just said in a budget and work plan, right? If you start a new group, you need to do all of that work, right? Every new group has to do that. If you are joining an existing group, you don't have to do all of that to the same extent. So you can focus a lot more on the work. So if you want to do a riverbank conservation group, and there's already an existing land conservation group, I would start by having conversations with the land conservation group and see if they're open to that. See if that's a possibility, in terms of what you want to do, how you want to do it. It may actually be a great addition to their program. Maybe there's more different kinds of outreach. Maybe you're bringing money, but also people and resources, human resources to do that work, to do more outreach, and that would be a great way for that group to grow. So it's a mutually beneficial situation. You still need to talk about what your purpose is, and you need to be communicating with that other group and be accountable and responsible, but you don't have to create all of those structures over again. And so as much as we think that's possible and important, it is a lot of work. So if you can do it with another group and you don't have to do all of that support work, I think that's generally a better choice, is to not start a new group. Sometimes it's the right thing, but often it's not. And even if it's not, you might grow into it needing to be a separate group, but then you're not having to create all those systems from the get-go. Julia, what do you think?
I concur with everything you just said. And I would highlight that I think, those last two slides that Karen presented before we sort of delved into the nitty gritty of the work, just focusing on how this work is relationship based, how we are all human beings. We need to get together to be in dialogue, to listen to one another. I think that's especially critical in a situation like this. Like knowing what we know just from this little description, we can't answer definitively what the right solution is in this case, but we would strongly encourage you to begin in conversation with the existing group and see if it's possible to work out something together. All of us on this call spend time helping sort of small separate grassroots groups try to figure out how to collaborate and potentially eventually merge. And so if you can have those conversations up front rather than down the road, it may save you a lot of heartache.
And I would just add, because we have the time to do that right now, that having that conversation is so important, because you never want to make assumptions that you know what the priorities are of other groups are, right? They may have shifting priorities. They may have just gotten a grant, and actually that aligns perfectly with what their next step is, but they hadn't shared the press release yet. Or I think having those initial conversations, making sure that there's not assumptions, and finding those shared goals as a baseline is so critical. And then the structure of the collaboration is up for grabs, right? This could be a one-off. Now you're the volunteer point person of a program that exists in collaboration with that existing group. Or maybe it becomes a program of that existing group. Or maybe you join the board and have some kind of a role, right? There's all different ways then to implement the good idea, but the goals are going to be the foundation, and then the roles can come from there to figure out what everyone can realistically and in a strengths-based way bring to the table and take away from that kind of collaboration. So thanks so much for your question, Rachel. It's a really great one. Yep,
Build on
Karen.
that really quickly. If you want to create your own group and then don't do that, then you risk that stepping on toes feeling and hard feelings and frustration. So even if even if you think you want to create a new group, have that conversation, because there is so much work to do in this space. We need to be doing it in alignment, if not specifically together, at least alignment and agreement, so that we are focusing on making our communities and the resources better, not fighting amongst ourselves.
Yeah, here's another great question. So, what is the best way to bring up the fact that an organization may feel unresilient, or that leadership delegations may need a shift in structure? How would you recommend starting that conversation?
I can take that one to start if you want, Karen.
Please do.
I think, and I encourage literally every group that I work with in all aspects of my work life to build in intentional opportunities for reflection into your meeting schedule, into your year, right? So on an upcoming meeting agenda, you could just have time to sort of take stock. Like if you have an existing strategic plan or a work plan, you can use that as a framework for the conversation. If you're not feeling like you have those things right now in any way that feels current, you can just put an item on the agenda that says sort of organizational health check-in. And it's surprising how what you may be feeling individually, you may be the only one who thinks you're perceiving these dynamics in your group, but once you open the conversation, I almost guarantee that you will find that other people have similar concerns or frustrations. And it's just making space to have that conversation in a way that feels respectful of everyone's effort. So it's not targeted at an individual. It's not necessarily trying to, again, it's focused on the listening, not so much on the trying to diagnose right away. I would say open up a conversation. How are we doing? How are we feeling in this work? How do we hope to grow in this work over the next year? And maybe leave it there in round one. Like maybe just kind of get all of those things out in the open. Remember that you like each other, remember that you have shared goals and you're doing this work for a reason. And then allow them to season a little bit and come back and begin to think about, what might be some steps that you could take to address shared concerns or shared goals that have come up.
And I'd add that be brave part that I mentioned at the end of my remarks is really important here. I hope that the folks that you need to talk to are also participating in this webinar or have watched it, because you also need to sort of accept some of these comments with grace, right? To not feel as you're attacked, but that your goal is to actually help the group function more effectively, so you can actually protect the resources and serve your community better. It's hard not to take things personally, but it's a really important part of group resilience is to try to think about what the group needs and not just what you need personally. And the other thing that's helpful is that this is a place where the checklist is super helpful. So it's not just you saying that we need to do this. This is saying, this is what the Watershed Alliance and the River Network say we need to be working on. Let's go through this and make sure we've got our systems in place so we can do better for our community and for the watershed. And so hopefully that helps remove it a little bit that makes it a little bit less personal, but that's part of the role of that as well.
Great, thank you. We just reached our time, and so I want to wrap up by addressing a comment that was chatted to me about interest in starting a local group, but I'm not sure if there's already a group. On the Hudson River Watershed Alliance website, we have a directory of watershed groups, and so admittedly, it may need to be updated. If you're a watershed group that wants me to update your information, just let me know. But you can go there as a starting point, and feel free to reach out to me for contacts or more context as well, if that's helpful. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us. The other frequently asked question that I've been getting is, can I share these resources with everyone? And the answer is yes, please share these resources with everyone. They're on our website, they're public, they're designed to be used by groups of all shapes and sizes. They're focused on the Hudson Valley, but certainly relevant for groups. And we're excited that they're available and able to be so easily used and shared. We hope to see you at the annual Watershed Conference. That's coming up on October 22nd is our virtual session, October 28th, our in-person session. Here's the link to the agenda, registration, more information. And thanks so much to the Hudson River Estuary Program and NUIPIC with funding from the Environmental Protection Fund for sponsoring today's session and a lot of the body of work as well. So thanks so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.